What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, May 26th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 10-game MLB slate tonight. Hopefully, you all had a good 3-day weekend. Going to go through this slate game by game as usual. I am going to use the Run the Sims projections that you see on the screen. You can sign up using the link in the description below. Get access to the projections, to the optimizer, to the MLB player props, and soon also to the Sims tool that we will be releasing for DraftKings. I will take a look at that at the end of the show to take a look at what my player exposures look like using that. It's still not quite ready for everybody else to use, but very close. I used it for the first time in contests yesterday, got sixth in the 333 on the night slate. So I'm happy with it so far, but really excited for that to come out. Should be released sooner than later. And again, I mentioned it on the show the other day, but it will be available initially for anyone that has signed up for our projections. Eventually, it'll be an add-on, but while we make sure we have everything ironed out and it works the way we need it to, it'll be available for you guys to try out for anybody that has signed up. If you are interested in projections, RTS MLB 26 gets 20% off of your first month. That does include the player props as well. If you only want the props, sign up, use RTS bets, get 20% off your first month of props. Starting with the Diamondbacks, taking on the Giants in San Francisco. Tyler Mahle on the mound for the Giants. $6,800 price tag, getting about 7% ownership. Eduardo Rodriguez on the other side going for Arizona, getting about 6% ownership at $7,600. This show will be a little bit different than usual just because I don't have the player exposures that I'm getting to in front of me. So again, I will go over those at the end of the show, but for now, I'm going to just focus on the matchups and then, talk the game theory stuff at the end when I see player exposures. But neither of these guys look like, true priorities. They're both getting like 5 to 10% ownership. Tyler Mahle comes into the game with a 23.5% strikeout percentage. Eduardo Rodriguez comes in at 17.5%, but we have seen him showcase some upside at times. San Francisco certainly has struggled offensively so far this season, but they are an offense that has capable hitters on it. They just haven't been as good as you would expect. They'll probably be better going forward. It is a park upgrade here for Rodriguez. San Francisco hasn't been a very good strikeout matchup. They've been a below average offense overall, 94 WRC plus, but only a 20.5% strikeout percentage. They rank 23rd in strikeout percentage. Arizona ranks 26th in strikeout percentage, 106 WRC plus. So I don't really see much to suggest that either guy is a great option on a 10-game slate, but certainly both playable if you're playing a lot of lineups. They're in San Francisco, which is nice. The game has a relatively low total. All of that looks, pretty good. It's just that neither of these teams strike out a ton. Both of these teams probably by the end of the season are average to above average offenses. Again, you have a Giants offense that has struggled, but you have Rafael Devers, you have Matt Chapman, you have Willy Adames. Like, this offense just probably isn't going to be one of the worst in the league by the end of the year like it is right now. So neither of these guys look like priorities, both certainly secondary options here if you are playing a lot of lineups. For the offenses, starting on the Arizona side, we do not have their lineup yet, at least as of when I ran everything. But looking at the matchup for Arizona against Tyler Mahle, if I can find, there it is. Why is this game listed first? Okay, yeah. So sorry about that. I don't know why this is listed as the first game. It's not. But since it is first on the screen right now, I will stick with it just so people can follow. But it keeps throwing me off that it's an Arizona San Francisco game and showing up first. Anyway, for the Arizona offense, it is a park downgrade for them, as I mentioned. Tyler Mahle so far this season, 174 expected ISO to righties, 151 to lefties. Much higher strikeout percentage against lefties than righties at 27% compared to about 20%. That was the case or has been the case since last year as well. 17% K percentage against righties, 25% against lefties. More power allowed to righties as well. So I think that not that reverse splits are always trustworthy, but we have seen more power allowed and lower strikeout rates against righties for Tyler Mahle. So not to say that you wouldn't want to play Corbin Carroll or Ketel Marte. Obviously, they're both very good left-handed hitters. They both have expected ISOs against right-handed pitching above 240 or higher. since the start of last season. But also you can look to some of these right-handed bats against him. There's not a lot of right-handed power in this lineup, though. Gabby Moreno, 177 expected ISO, probably your best right-handed power bat against Tyler Mahle. So you don't really have an Arizona lineup that if you were trying to target Tyler Mahle's reverse splits can really take advantage. Like all of their best hitters are left-handed, Marte, Carroll, Perdomo. But so it's not to say to shy away from those guys, but the combination of the park and the fact that Tyler Mahle has been considerably better at limiting production and getting strikeouts against lefties than righties makes me think that Arizona's not a super appealing offense here either. On the other side, against Rodriguez, you do have cheap price tags on the Giants, which is nice. You do have a fine but not great pitcher in Eduardo Rodriguez. Willy Adames, 3,400, Chapman at 3,200. I mentioned that the Giants have struggled offensively, but this is a team that they have plenty of hitters with a long track record. So I do kind of like the value component there. I certainly don't think that the Giants are a team that I'm likely to be jamming lots of on a 10-game slate in San Francisco. But Eduardo Rodriguez, 165 expected ISO to righties since last season, 182 to lefties. Willy Adames against left-handed pitching since 2024, 189 expected ISO. Casey Schmidt, 205. Devers holds his own, 165 expected ISO against lefties. Chapman at 171. So I kind of think overall this is just one of those games where nothing really stands out, but there are some pretty nice price points, combined between between like Rodriguez being really cheap, Tyler Mahle being pretty cheap, the whole Giants offense being cheap. So it's a spot where in a 150 lineup set, it can be useful just getting some low-owned, cheap, relatively decent ceilings. But from a prioritization standpoint, I'd be pretty surprised if at the end of the show I really have a lot of anything from this game. I think there's just going to be better options elsewhere on the slate. Now, I think getting back in line with when – nope, this game is later too, but I'm just going to go in order of what's on the screen. Philadelphia, San Diego, also a late game. It's on the night slate. It's at 9:40 Eastern, 6:40 actual time. So it looks like our time zones got mixed up. I'm almost positive Davis has nothing to do with our back end of programming, but it does seem like he could be responsible for fucking up the time zones here. But anyway, Philadelphia, San Diego, 6:40 Pacific time, 9:40 Eastern time. Aaron Nola on the mound for the Phillies. Randy Vasquez going for San Diego. $7,500 price tag on Vasquez. 4% ownership there. Aaron Nola going for the Phillies. 11% ownership here. I do think Nola looks better than Vasquez. Vasquez has shown signs of life this year after being a really poor strikeout pitcher and pitcher overall in the past. 54 and 2/3 innings pitched this year, 20% strikeout percentage, still has a 5.43 expected ERA. He's not free. He's facing a lineup that has Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, solid Phillies lineup, even though they underperformed at the beginning of the season. Nola on the other side, clearly on the back end of his career, 4.75 expected ERA, 22.8% strikeout percentage this year. Stuff has been good. He's struggled in terms of command, basically league average command so far this season. Whereas in the past, he's been an above average control guy. But you're seeing that reflected in his salary as well. $7,200 salary. Like, say what you want about Aaron Nola at this point in his career, it's still pretty crazy to see a cheaper salary on Aaron Nola against the Padres than on Randy Vasquez against the Phillies. And we don't really have him projected for that much ownership here either. Maybe he does end up coming in higher because of the value component. But at the same time, it is a 10-game slate. The Padres aren't, a cakewalk offense or anything like that. They do strike out quite a bit more than they did last season. They are up to 7th in strikeout percentage overall, not accounting for pitcher handedness. 23.3% strikeout percentage, 89 WRC plus. They've been a very good matchup for opposing pitchers so far this season. Kind of like I was saying with the Giants, I don't know that holds. I don't expect it to hold forever. Like, you're talking about an offense that has Fernando Tatis that has not hit a home run yet. I assume Tatis is going to start hitting home runs at some point. Maybe not. But you also have, Manny Machado. You have Jackson Merrill. You have a Padres offense, Bogarts, Cronenworth, like Castellanos, Laureano. You have an offense that has guys that can hit, or at least, are league average hitters, and then some guys that are better. So I don't expect this to be one of the worst offenses in baseball by the end of the year. That being said, I think Nola's too cheap here. You have like a 4-run total for the Padres. I don't think Nola's a great pitcher by any stretch at this point, but he's still solid enough. And I like the combination of low ownership and solid strikeout matchup, a cheap price tag. I am pretty interested in Nola here as an SP2, even though, not super confident any given night because he's not that good anymore. But I think all things considered, he does look pretty good here. Starting with the Philadelphia offense against Vasquez, you don't really have much ownership coming in. We have like 6% coming into Bryson Stott, who has picked things up of late. I know Owen, our data guy, had either tweeted or mentioned in Discord or maybe both that he thought Stott had been underperforming based on just batted ball data, his swing, all of that. And we have seen him start to come around, but not a ton of ownership coming into Philadelphia here. They have around a 4-run total as well. It is cool in San Diego, and that is, advantageous for the pitchers, not advantageous for the bats so much. You do still have power upside here, though. 171 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Vasquez this year, 269 to righties. Since last year, 217 expected ISO to righties, 212 to lefties. Schwarber, Harper, if you're getting to these guys in large field tournaments, and we have that $5, like 41,000 entry tournament on DraftKings tonight, these are obviously guys that, at 5% or less ownership are capable of hitting multiple home runs. The matchup against Vasquez isn't bad. You do have, quality relievers behind him, potentially, depending on what the score in the game is for San Diego, but clearly a high upside offense at low ownership. Overall, I expect to be pretty flat on offenses with a couple of exceptions tonight. Philadelphia is not one of those exceptions. They're not a team that I expect to jam a lot of. And the same goes for San Diego. I do think I like the Philly side a little bit more just because you do have the true like 2-home run type threat in Schwarber. You have Turner, you have Harper, whereas with San Diego, like you have Fernando Tatis's name, but no home runs yet this year. That is reflected in the price point. Like he's a good point per dollar play. He has second base eligibility, which is good, but he's not hitting for power so far this year. Jackson Merrill's good. Manny Machado has struggled, but overall is good. You're getting some salary decreases on guys that, certainly have track records of being really good hitters, but just from a straight up, like, who has more guys that you're not shocked if they hit 2 home runs tonight? It's the Philadelphia side. That being said, sub 5% ownership to most of the Padres, 5% on Merrill, 7% on Tatis. As I mentioned before, Nola's not great anymore, but he's still a pretty decent pitcher. 133 expected ISO against righties since the start of last season. Lefties have done more damage against him with a 209 expected ISO. This season, the power numbers are actually flipped. 207 expected ISO to righties, 176 to lefties. He is striking righties out about 7% more often than lefties, 26.5% to righties, 19.5% to lefties. You do have more right-handed power in the Padres lineup, at least theoretically, Tatis, Machado, Castellanos, Laureano, but Merrill and Sheets do have power from the left side. I do think they're both, pretty interesting one-offs if you need to save salary. First base outfield eligibility on Gavin Sheets at 3,200, Jackson Merrill only 3,700 with outfield, obviously, eligibility. So both of those guys are interesting given the matchup, but overall, it's another game where I don't think offensively there's really priorities here. I think Nola most likely ends up being my highest owned guy from this game. Ted mentioned in chat, I actually hadn't noticed, but he said Nola projecting better than Schlittler. Definitely has to do with the parks, if that's the case. I'm not sure if that'll hold by lock. It does seem a little aggressive given the gap in strikeout percentage between Schlittler and Nola. But you do get Schlittler in the worst park, the worst park in baseball, I believe, for getting strikeouts. If it's not the worst, it's one of them in Kansas City. So it is a park downgrade for Schlittler as far as strikeouts go. And then Nola gets the San Diego team that does strike out a lot. Kansas City, by comparison, 12th in strikeout percentage overall this year. So it's not the case he doesn't strike out, but San Diego has struck out more. And anytime you're pitching in Kansas City, it just becomes more difficult to get strikeouts. So I think that's likely what is driving that. They're projected basically the same, less than a point difference between them, but I'm sure that is what's driving it. Houston taking on Texas, still a messed up start time here. 8:05 Eastern, 7:05 Central. But Astros Rangers in Texas. Jack Leiter going for the Rangers, Jason Alexander going for Houston. $7,800 price tag, 2% ownership to Jason Alexander. $8,100 price tag, 13% ownership to Jack Leiter. Houston, not having a good season. Neither are the Rangers. They just got no hit yesterday. But the Astros have had a quality offense overall this season. They rank 14th in strikeout percentage. They have a 108 WRC plus. They are 110 WRC plus. They're 8th in WRC plus. Not a great matchup for Leiter, but he is a pitcher that does have some upside. Former, I believe, 3rd overall pick. You've seen him take a step forward this year. 25% strikeout percentage. Still has a 4.5 expected ERA through 54 and 2/3 innings pitched. So it's not a safe matchup, but at $8,100, mid-range price tag, not a slate that has tons of great pitching. We had all the aces go yesterday. So not to say that there's none going today. Like Schlittler obviously is really, really good. Chase Burns is really, really good, but you don't have as loaded a slate at pitcher today as you did yesterday. So getting that $8,100 mid-range price tag on Leiter, a pitcher that can go in there and get strikeouts, I think he's a solid tournament option. The ownership seems pretty reasonable. It's not that you're super comfortable with the matchup or super confident he's going to pitch well, but when he does pitch well, he does get strikeouts generally, and he is reasonably priced, and the opportunity cost on the slate isn't that high. Alexander on the other side, just probably a little bit more expensive than he should be. He's only made a couple of starts so far this year, but historically not a very good strikeout pitcher. The Rangers offense, kind of mediocre. It has guys that are capable of hitting without a doubt. But overall, 20th in WRC plus so far this season. They have a 23% strikeout percentage, which ranks 9th, tied for 8th with the Yankees. So it's an okay spot for Alexander. It's just that, he's 7,800. He's more expensive than Aaron Nola. Again, not that Nola's great, but this is kind of pointing, I think, to why I think Nola's a good play. You're getting just these random guys, Randy Vasquez, Jason Alexander, at more expensive price tags than Aaron Nola. I'll roll my dice. I'll roll the dice on Aaron Nola in that spot. So not too much interest in Jason Alexander. Offensively here, on the Houston side against Leiter, you do get some negative correlation with the field. Leiter likely to be, in that 10 to 15% ownership range, give or take. And you do have good hitters here. You have Jeremy Pena back. You have Yordan Alvarez, homered yesterday. He's 6,200. Christian Walker with a home run yesterday, only 4K. And you're not getting much ownership because, again, it is a 10-game slate. You have a lot of offenses that look very similar. Jack Leiter is certainly not one of the worst pitchers on the slate. So I think Houston is a solid offense to get to in larger field tournaments. Like I said before, there's only a couple of teams that I'm really getting a lot of offensively right now. Houston is not one of them, but I would throw them into that same mix with the Phillies, out of teams we've already talked about, like the Phillies, where you have legitimately good hitters on this team. They're not in a bad spot in Texas against Jack Leiter. They're not in a great spot, but I think that, they're a high upside offense. You have some stolen base upside as well. That increases with Jeremy Pena back. They'll look to run, Jake Myers, Cam Smith, Isaac Paredes, always preferred in Houston because of the Crawford boxes in left field and the fact that most of his home runs are just pulled fly balls right down the line. But mostly inexpensive offense, which is nice. Yordan Alvarez is the only expensive bat here. Jeremy Pena is typically better than a 4K bat. So is Christian Walker. So I do think that Houston gives you a nice combination of power upside, stolen base upside, and lack of ownership, just because there's so many places to allocate your ownership on a slate of this size. On the other side for Texas against Alexander, actually I wanted to mention too with the Houston bats, Jack Leiter since last year has allowed a 207 expected ISO to lefties, 166 to righties. So again, another just point in favor of, even if you're not getting Houston stacks, if you can find a way to fit 6% owned Yordan Alvarez in as a one-off, that's going to look pretty good. On the other side against Jason Alexander, since last season, relatively small sample size. He's only thrown 622 pitches to righties, 829 to lefties, but 140 expected ISO to righties, 189 to lefties. So you have traditional splits there. Doesn't strike out too many guys, slightly higher against righties at 21%. I think the Rangers look fine. Brandon Nimmo, 4,200. Evan Carter, 3,700. Those guys both look pretty appealing. Overall against right-handed pitching since last season for the Rangers bats, you're looking at Nimmo with a 196 expected ISO, Jake Berger's at 197. Evan Carter's at 153, but he'll look to run a bit typically as well. You don't have a great Texas offense. Brandon Nimmo, probably my favorite play here at 4,200. He is our highest projected guy by quite a bit out of the Texas bats. He is also getting the most ownership at 8%. You have MPE on Ezekiel Duran, which is nice. But Texas getting a little bit more ownership than some of the other teams, but nothing too crazy. I do think Nimmo would be the guy that I look to first if I'm just singling out one guy from the Rangers. The Astros bullpen has two lefties in it, but one of them is a back-end guy in Brian King. So they really only have one left-handed reliever that they're likely to use in the middle innings to match up. And if you get to, Brian King at the back end, you probably aren't really live to win a tournament with Texas anyway, because Houston's likely winning the game. On the other side, the Rangers have three lefties, including their closer. So kind of a similar situation where two of their lefties are back-end guys, and then Jalen Beeks, more of a middle innings guy. But just thinking about it from matching up with Yordan Alvarez, they do have arms that can do it, but Alvarez can also handle left-handed pitching as well. It's not only that, there's obviously no pitch hit risk, but he'll still do damage. And then also the Astros are able to do a little bit better job typically than the Rangers in actually protecting Yordan Alvarez from a left-handed platoon guy, because they're going to have Christian Walker most likely hitting right behind them. Jake Myers probably in there as well. So they can put right-handed bats behind them, whereas there's a pretty good chance Texas has Brandon Nimmo hitting either right behind or right in front of Jock Peterson. You might have Ozuna or Carter in there as well. So it does become a little bit easier for Houston to throw lefties potentially at Brandon Nimmo than it is for the Rangers to throw lefties at Yordan Alvarez. Miami taking on the Blue Jays in a game that finally does start at 7:07 Eastern time. We finally have the correct time listed on the screen. Sandy Alcantara on the mound for the Marlins. Braden Fisher is opening for the Blue Jays. Double checking to see who is expected to follow him, although I don't think it's going to matter too much. Spencer Miles, 6K, is likely to be following him. Miles did have a really good outing last time as the bulk reliever. He went, I think, 3 2/3 or 4 innings. I'm double checking that now. But either way, he went 4 1/3 against the Yankees, struck out 6. You're not expecting that type of performance, obviously. I'm not, anticipating really rostering him here against Miami. But if you were looking to do it, he is likely to be the follower. Alcantara, 8K, getting 4% ownership. Not too interested in him. Not a very good strikeout pitcher. Not a great strikeout matchup against Toronto, although they still are without Alejandro Kirk, who is someone who drives down their strikeout percentage quite a bit. But Alcantara coming in, 16% strikeout percentage in 69 2/3 innings. He's been good in terms of expected run prevention, 3.35 expected ERA. He's not a bad pitcher. He's not somebody I love targeting against. He's just somebody that generally does get priced up a little bit for his ability as a real life pitcher and as somebody that prevents runs compared to his ability to rack up DFS points, which are driven very heavily by strikeouts, as we know. Toronto's active roster still 29th in strikeout percentage, 95 WRC plus. So not super interested in the pitching here. Offensively, probably not going to be super interested in either side either. Miami does get a bit of a park upgrade going into Rogers Center. You get the bullpen game, though, which isn't super appealing, with Fisher opening, Miles probably going through the lineup twice. You get, stolen base upside from Xavier Edwards. Otto Lopez has been very good offensively so far this year at 4,200. But nothing that really stands out to me here is something I would want to go out of my way to target. It would probably be Edwards and Lopez first, but you're not going to get any ownership on Toronto pitching either. So, that kind of, especially if you're talking the $5 40K entry tournament on DraftKings, a tournament of that size, it really does start to become more beneficial to not only have low owned players, obviously, but really maximize it by, maybe having the Padres, just thinking of, pitchers we've talked about that already have ownership, having the Padres against Aaron Nola, having the Astros against Jack Leiter, just because it's so many lineups that you have to beat out. Just having, the Marlins are 4%, 5% owned across the board. That's still a lot of Marlins lineups in terms of just raw lineups, where if you can say, get a similarly owned offense that also is facing a 15, 20, 30% owned pitcher, it just makes it that much easier to actually get paid when it works out for you. So that's another thing kind of working against the offenses in this game. It's not that they're like considerably less likely to have success than some of the other offenses that we've talked about, but you're not getting any sort of negative correlation with the field. And that really applies to the Miami side against Alcantara as well. He's likely to only get, 3-4% ownership, somewhere in that range. So far since last season for Alcantara, 132 expected ISO to righties, 184 to lefties. This year, though, he's been better. 150 expected ISO against lefties, sub 100 against righties. So again, he's not getting strikeouts, but he's just really not giving up a lot of production either. I don't really see anything that stands out to me offensively. Okamoto is really cheap at 3,500. He's getting the most ownership offensively in this game, or actually period in this game. He is hitting very poorly of late. So that could be just a small sample size. It could be the league is adjusting. We see it all the time where rookies come up, or in his case, come over, and they start out really well, like Okamoto did. And then the book gets out on them. The league kind of figures out like, okay, this guy can hit fastballs really well. Time to start making him hit curveballs, making him hit sliders. Some guys adjust quicker than others. Some guys never adjust. Look at half the Orioles team. But I think that's probably kind of what you're seeing here. So again, it could just be a slump. It could be that he needs to make an adjustment because the league is adjusted to him. Whatever it is, he clearly has offensive upside and he is cheap. But he does not have a great matchup here against Alcantara. So from a value standpoint, he's probably your best option here. Obviously, if you wanted to play Vlad Guerrero, like it's Vlad Guerrero, Dalton Varsho's good at 3,800. But outside of just the obvious things like Vlad Guerrero hits well, Xavier Edwards steals a lot of bases. Like outside of that stuff, I don't think there's really anything I can point to in this game as being super interesting. Cincinnati taking on the Mets in New York. Chase Burns starting for the Reds. Certainly one of the most talented pitchers going today. 59 innings pitched, 2.85 expected ERA, 28% strikeout percentage, 112 stuff plus this season. Command has been slightly better than average as well. Very, very good young arm for Cincinnati. He's pitching in, almost called it Shea Stadium. He's pitching in Citi Field. Nice park upgrade for him, getting out of Great American Ballpark as well. The Mets rank in the middle of the pack in strikeout percentage this year. They have an 87 WRC plus. Another offense that, probably from this point forward is better than they have been year to date, but doesn't mean it has to start tonight in a really good spot against, or a really tough spot rather, against Chase Burns. Jorge in chat just mentioned that Vlad is out. So that's good to know. Didn't have that Toronto lineup when I ran everything before. Certainly makes the matchup a little bit more appealing in that case for Alcantara. I doubt that it's enough to move the needle too much and make you want to start rostering a lot of him, but certainly makes it a little bit better. If it's not injury related, it would also increase pinch hit risk for somebody, like whoever comes up in a big spot at the end of, in the later innings. Probably turns into Vlad. But anyway, getting back to Cincinnati and the Mets, 34% ownership coming into Burns at 10K, 21% ownership coming into David Peterson at 5,700. David Peterson has not been very good overall this season. He's been used as a starter. He's been used as a bulk guy. He's getting the actual start tonight. In his starts this year, 28 and a third innings pitched, 4.9 expected ERA, does have a 21% strikeout percentage, and historically really isn't a bad pitcher. He's kind of just a guy, and he really shouldn't be $5,700. He should probably be, 6,700, 7K, 7,200, somewhere in that range. Overall this year, including his time as the bulk guy, 22% strikeout percentage, 3.01 FIP, 5.03 ERA, but that's not really backed up by anything. His expected ERA is 4.4, xFIP 3.6, FIP 3.01. BABIP is 351. So he's been very unlucky on balls in play. To put that in context, his career BABIP is 316. Left on base percentage, 62.5%, 72% for his career. So he's still getting ground balls, 52% ground ball percentage this year. It's very likely that he is better going forward at preventing runs than he has been to date. And then you're getting a Reds offense that, sure, they do have plenty of power, but they're getting a park downgrade. They actually have the highest strikeout percentage in baseball this season. They've surpassed Baltimore, the White Sox, and the Rockies. 106 WRC plus. They can do damage, but good value option here. He is getting the start, like I said. So Chase Burns, clearly one of your highest projected pitchers on the slate. What you want to do with him in terms of playing him in lineups is, a game theory question. I'm not sure. I didn't look to see what I was getting in the lineups that I built. I wouldn't be shocked if I'm over the field on Burns. I wouldn't be shocked if I'm like half the field. Generally, my approach this year has been in the cases where you're getting like 10K pitchers that are also the highest owned, I generally end up around like half the field as opposed to being over the field. But again, it has nothing to do with Burns, his talent, anything like that. He's exceptional. It really just has to do more with my process, how I generally play MLB DFS. You can certainly make plenty of very, very good Chase Burns lineups if you want to. He's obviously one of the most likely pitchers to succeed on the entire slate. For the offenses here, I do think the Reds are going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm getting to them, but I think they're interesting just from a game theory standpoint because David Peterson is a fine pitcher. He's not elite. He's not Chase Burns, and he's going to get ownership just because he is so cheap. So and it is still a 10-game slate. So like chances are, let's say David Peterson scores like 12 fantasy points. That's probably not enough to win a large field tournament because you have so many offenses and so many pitchers. Most likely you're going to be able to find cheap bats that do well. And then you're just going to need whatever, good pitchers scored 20 plus points. So even though Peterson is cheap enough that he can give up a few runs and still not kill you from a point per dollar standpoint, getting to the Reds against him does still give you some pretty nice leverage against the field, just because if they do score a few runs off of him, not only are the Reds themselves pretty low owned, but you're talking about probably 15-20% of the field having a pitcher that didn't do enough to help them win a tournament. Elly De La Cruz has also been good from the right side so far this season. Historically for his career, he's been exceptionally bad as a right-handed hitter, but at least in this year's small sample size, he has turned that around against left-handed pitching. So far this season, has a 161 WRC plus, 129 against right-handed pitching. Again, it's inherently a small sample. He has 58 at bats, 63 plate appearances against lefties, but he's already hit 5 home runs against them. So at least showing signs of being able to hit for power against left-handed pitching. Obviously, he has stolen base upside against everyone. To put that in context, he has 5 home runs this year in 58 at bats against left-handed pitching. For his entire career, he has 563 at bats. He has 18 home runs. So coming into this season, he had like 13 home runs and 500 at bats. And then so far this year, he has 5 in 58. Could be small sample. I think more likely with somebody as talented as Elly De La Cruz, it's probably just him getting better at hitting right-handed. So that is, something to keep in mind. Sal Stewart, certainly tons of power from the right side, first base and third base eligible. You get MPE on Spencer Steer as well. David Peterson, over the last couple of seasons against right-handed pitching, or against right-handed hitting rather, 147 expected ISO, only an 18% K percentage. Lefties, sub 100 expected ISO with a 30% K percentage. You have one left-handed bat in the Reds lineup, JJ Bleday batting 7th. So you do have a right-handed heavy lineup here for the Reds. You are going to have some pinch hit risk probably at the top, or not necessarily even at the top. Blake Dunn probably does have pinch hit risk at the top. You probably have some pinch hit risk later on with like Dane Myers as well. We have 15% pinch hit probability on Dunn. We have 22 on Myers. Bleday, I think, is actually probably lower than this because they're starting him against the lefty. But my point being that do keep in mind the outfielders in particular, Dunn and Myers, they could be pinch hit for later on in the game. But from a game theory standpoint, I think the Reds are actually kind of interesting. Not sure if I'm getting to them, but they're mostly cheap outside of De La Cruz. You're getting negative correlation against a relatively popular pitcher in David Peterson. That being said, they do have the park downgrade in Citi Field, so that's not ideal. Yankees taking on the Royals in Kansas City. Cam Schlittler going for the Yankees at $10,500. Bailey Falter on the other side for KC. He is $5,500. He is not getting any ownership. I mean, I guess if you want to punt pitcher and not go to David Peterson and hope that Bailey Falter somehow like has a good game, you could, but I wouldn't recommend it. In his most recent outing, Falter went 2 innings. He hasn't gone more than 3 innings yet this year, so not likely to go deep into this game either. So basically you're getting like a bullpen, you're getting a semi-bullpen game here, most likely, where you get 1 to 2 times through the order for Bailey Falter, and then you turn it over to the bullpen. Schlittler, obviously the only pitcher that you're interested in. He's been exceptional so far in his career. This year, 66 innings pitched, 2.6 expected ERA, near 30% strikeout percentage, best stuff plus on the slate, just ahead of Chase Burns, well above average command. He is an exceptional pitcher. Mentioned it already when we were talking about Nola. The projection on Schlittler is a little low compared to where Schlittler normally is. That is largely very likely to be just because of this park. The strikeout matchup is pretty neutral with Kansas City by itself, but pitching in Kauffman Stadium is a negative. If you want to play Schlittler, like obviously he's got a massive ceiling. He's really, really, really good. I don't think I'm getting to too much of him. He is still getting some ownership at the elevated price tag. Generally, Kansas City is just a spot too, where I've kind of noticed throughout the season that especially when you're talking, again, the popular pitchers that are getting ownership, I generally just don't get to them as much because I do think that our projections handle the strikeout park factors a little bit better, a little bit differently than others. And as a result, we tend to have a little bit lower projection on guys that are pitching in Kansas City. So clearly all the talent in the world here on Schlittler. Having a bad park to get strikeouts certainly does not mean that Cam Schlittler cannot get strikeouts, but he is getting ownership. He is relatively expensive. I would expect that I personally am not getting to the 17% here. I will look at that at the end of the show, but that would be my guess. But that being said, still, he's really, really good. For the offenses here, the Yankees, I expect to get a lot of against Falter. It's a good park for offense. You're leaving Yankee Stadium, so you don't get the short porch and right, but you did move the fences in Kansas City. It's a good offensive park in general anyway. Aaron Judge getting 24% ownership. You have 15% coming into Bellinger, 14 to Jazz, 14 to Rice, 10 to Wells, 10 to Grissom. This is probably going to be the highest owned offense on the slate. I think it's likely to be my highest owned offense as well. They just look pretty good. They have an implied run total north of 5, which is high for this slate. You don't have a game in Colorado. So, I kind of mentioned it before, but most offenses on this slate look very, very similar. The Yankees, I believe, are one of the only teams above 5. I think it's them, the Dodgers, and then the Mariners are right around 5. So they really do stand out there. You don't have super expensive bats necessarily either. Like Rice is expensive, Judge is expensive, but other than that, those are the only 2 guys likely to be in the lineup above 5K. So you get a good value component. You get really good hitters. You get a team that has arguably the highest run total on the slate. And all that looks pretty good. The only, I think, negative is that it is kind of that semi-bullpen game where everybody's probably going to not face anybody more than once, certainly not more than twice. I'd be surprised. So that's the negative. But overall, I think the Yankees look like one of the best offenses on the slate. I expect them to be the most popular offense on the slate, most likely. On the other side for KC, you are getting a little bit of ownership right now, probably just because they're so cheap. Michael Garcia, 4,400. Salvador Perez, 3,200. They're both getting like 5 to 8% ownership. Bobby Witt at 10%. He's, Bobby Witt. That being said, they're still facing Cam Schlittler. You can say whatever you want about Cam Schlittler maybe losing some strikeouts because of where the game is. It's still Cam Schlittler. It's still a pitcher that I certainly don't want to go that far out of my way to target against. He's insanely good. 155 expected ISO to righties so far in his career, 127 to lefties, striking righties out 26% of the time, striking lefties out 30% of the time. There is upside on Kansas City. They have speed. They have power. You have, 2 good catching options that are both cheap. Obviously on DraftKings, you can't play them together, but Salvador Perez at 3,200, Carter Jensen at 3,300. Those are going to be 2 of your highest upside catching options on any given slate, really, regardless of matchup. Caglione, 3,100, tons of power there. Pasquantino's cheap. So this is a really, really, really cheap offense. You are getting negative correlation against Schlittler, which is a plus. But that being said, still not one that I think I would want to go too crazy on just because they are pretty unlikely to succeed in such a difficult matchup. Twins facing the White Sox in Chicago. Joe Ryan going for Minnesota at 9K, getting about 18% ownership. Sean Burke on the other side, 6,600, getting about 11% ownership. Burke is okay. Like, for a White Sox pitcher in general, he's not bad, but he's not somebody that is great either. I do like the price tag, though, at 6,600. He has a 20% K percentage this year in 39 2/3 innings pitched, 4.8 expected ERA. The Twins offense, kind of up and down. Obviously, they have some good hitters in there. Buxton has been phenomenal of late. They're middle of the pack in strikeout percentage. They have a 103 WRC+, which ranks 15th. So pretty middling matchup for Burke. If you're going there, I think it's just for the savings on your SP2. He is getting right now like half the ownership of David Peterson, who was $900 less. So, that's a pivot that you could potentially make if you want. But certainly not somebody that I really like on his own merits. So if you are going there, I think it's just because he's cheap. On the other side, though, Joe Ryan getting 17% ownership. So similar ownership to Cam Schlittler in a better strikeout spot against a White Sox team that ranks third behind Cincinnati and Baltimore by a fraction of a percentage in strikeout percentage so far this year. They've been an above average offense as far as production goes, 108 WRC+, ranks 10th in baseball, but they strike out a lot. Joe Ryan is $1,500 less than Schlittler. He has a 27% strikeout percentage this year. You compare that to Schlittler at 29.5%. Like, yeah, it's worse, but it's not that much worse. The strikeout spot is certainly better. You're getting the same ownership. You're getting a $1,500 discount. We have a higher projection on Ryan by quite a bit. I like Joe Ryan a lot here, especially if that ownership is going to hold in that range. So that's one that I'll be interested to see if our Sims agree with me. But just looking at this, I would expect to get a lot of Joe Ryan. Again, it's not a safe spot. The White Sox certainly have hit well this year. Murakami's the real deal. But Colston Montgomery is very good. Miguel Vargas is good. But they still strike out. And Joe Ryan is a good pitcher, gets a lot of strikeouts, 2.87 expected ERA this year. I don't think there's that big of a talent difference. And I mean this as a compliment to Ryan because I think Cam Schlittler is fantastic. I don't think there's that much of a talent difference between the two of them. And you're getting a $1,500 price difference in a better strikeout spot for Joe Ryan. So interested to see what ends up happening with ownership. But I do like Joe Ryan here quite a bit, especially if this ownership holds. Offensively on the Minnesota side against Burke, he has, since last season, allowed a 166 expected ISO to lefties, 222 to righties, slightly lower strikeout percentage against righties as well. So a little bit of reverse splits there for Burke. Doesn't make me like Byron Buxton any less. 261 expected ISO against right-handed pitching for Buxton since last season. Trying to see if we have a Twins lineup, and we do. So Buxton leading off. Then you get three lefties with Lee, Larnach, and Clemens. All of those guys are still fine. Austin Martin hitting fifth. Individually, Buxton, I think, really stands out as a good play here. If you want to stack Minnesota, like you can, they're cheap outside of Buxton. But that 5-6% ownership to Buxton because he's 6,100, I still think looks really good. I would certainly throw him in that mix with like Yordan Alvarez or even like Kyle Schwarber maybe I don't really like your team's stack all that much, but if your team as a whole is like the fact that your team as a whole isn't in a great spot is going to pull down your ownership. Like just comparing it to Aaron Judge. And again, like I'm probably going to have plenty of Aaron Judge. I think Aaron Judge is a good play, whatever. You're getting a quarter of the ownership right now to Byron Buxton, to Kyle Schwarber, to whoever else I just said that I am forgetting. Yordan Alvarez. Like you could very easily make Yankee stacks and then play Yordan Alvarez, like a 5-man Yankee stack, and then play Yordan Alvarez instead of Aaron Judge, or is one approach you could take to kind of get the best of both worlds. Or if you're just not getting as much of the Yankees because they're so popular, just get over the field on all of Alvarez, Buxton, Schwarber. Like these guys still have massive upside in their respective matchups. Buxton certainly included there. First base outfield eligibility is pretty nice on Cody Clemens. Batting cleanup at 3,300. So I think he's a pretty solid value option as well. White Sox against Ryan. You're getting negative correlation. You're getting an offense that has a high ceiling. So that's good. Obviously, it's one of less likely spots to succeed given that Ryan is good. But Ryan does give up some power. This year, not quite as much, but still more to lefties than righties. Sub 100 expected ISO to righties this year, 160 to lefties. Since last year, 142 to righties, 200 to lefties. Higher strikeout percentage against righties as well. So one negative here for Joe Ryan is, yes, the White Sox do strike out a lot, but there are only two right-handed hitters in the White Sox lineup, Miguel Vargas and Chase Mydroff, batting third and fifth. Joe Ryan, since last year, 23.5% K percentage against lefties. That's still good. And so I'm not saying this to mean like, oh, you actually shouldn't play Joe Ryan or anything like that. But 23.5% K percentage to lefties, 33% against righties. You certainly do prefer Joe Ryan against more right-handed heavy lineups. That being said, that's factored into our projections. Our projections come straight from our in-house play-by-play sim model that is simulating out, these matchups and these games over and over and over again. So he would just project higher if you had more right-handed bats here for the White Sox. We did not have the White Sox lineup when I built lineups, but we also didn't have very many righties in there. We had Derek Hill, which is one additional right-handed bat. He's replaced by somebody I've never even heard of, Riku Nishida, at the bottom of the lineup. So it's probably going to be a pretty similar projection anyway to Ryan. It's not like we had a super right-handed heavy lineup, but certainly you would have preferred that. Moving over to the Cardinals and the Brewers. Brendan said favorite pitcher under 8K. I'm going to look at my player exposures at the end of the show and see what came out of the sim. St. Louis, Milwaukee. Kyle Harrison pitching for Milwaukee. Michael McGreevy going for St. Louis. No real interest in McGreevy here. $7,400 price tag, 2% ownership. The Cardinals offense isn't bad. People thought it was going to be, but it's not. 5.82. Brewers offense isn't bad. Neither is the Cardinals offense, but 5.82 expected ERA for McGreevy, 17% strikeout percentage. His command this year has been excellent. Everything else has been terrible. Stuff plus is the lowest out of any starting pitcher going today at 81.1. Just not a very good DFS pitcher. And kind of like I was saying before, like this is another pitcher that is just more expensive than Aaron Nola. So again, it's not so much like I love Aaron Nola. I love Aaron Nola when he's less expensive than Randy Vasquez and Michael McGreevy and Jason Alexander and shit like that. And probably, I don't know this for sure. Again, I'll look at the exposures, but I'm guessing my favorite pitcher under 8K is probably Aaron Nola or David Peterson. But that aside, Kyle Harrison here getting 34% ownership, $9,700 salary. I expect to get a lot of him. We have, I think, our highest projection on him on the entire slate. Yeah. And it's not particularly close, at least as of when I built lineups before the show. He's been very, very good this year. He, was a highly considered pitching prospect when he came up. He got traded a couple times, lands on Milwaukee. He has a 32.2% strikeout percentage. That is 2.5 points higher than Cam Schlittler. It is 4 points higher than Chase Burns. Like you kind of think, at least, maybe I'm wrong, but like, I feel like Cam Schlittler, Chase Burns, they're like at the forefront of everybody's mind as far as like these really super talented young strikeout pitchers. And they should be. They're really good, super talented young strikeout pitchers. But like Kyle Harrison, I kind of like never see his name thrown around. I don't see a lot of stuff about him on Twitter, his highlights or anything like that. But he's been exceptional this year. 2.89 expected ERA in 45 innings pitched, 32% strikeout percentage, best location plus grade of any pitcher going today at 115, above average stuff plus at 106. He's been really, really, really good. And like I was saying before, like the Cardinals offense isn't bad. Like people expected it to be horrible this year. They have a 105 WRC plus. They have a 21.5% strikeout percentage, which ranks 20th. It's not an ideal spot, but you don't necessarily have an ideal spot for Chase Burns. You don't necessarily have an ideal spot for Cam Schlittler either. Harrison's a little bit less expensive at 9,700. I like him quite a bit here. He is getting a lot of ownership at 34%. So certainly if you were to say like, well, yeah, I get all that, but Cam Schlittler is getting half the ownership. I want to play more Schlittler in place of Harrison. Perfectly reasonable stance. I doubt it's what I'm going to end up doing, but it's certainly reasonable. You could, say, well, he's getting similar ownership to Burns. I prefer Burns, not crazy. It's not where I'm at, but it's not crazy. But of the three, like I think best pitchers on the slate here, that are at the top with Harrison, Schlittler, Burns. I think that Harrison's probably my favorite of the three. I left Joe Ryan out of it since he is $9K, so he's a little bit less expensive. I was just, talking the 9,700 and up guys. But I think in terms of talent, you definitely have like a tier that is Harrison, Schlittler, Burns, Ryan. My expected approach, at least with the information we have right now, is I think that projection-wise, Harrison is the highest projected guy. Like, that's what is showing up in our data right now. So that would give him the edge compared to like Burns and Schlittler. And then you look at the ownership, and Ryan is similarly owned to Schlittler, but he's cheaper and projects better. He's less owned than Burns, and he's cheaper. So my guess is that Harrison and Ryan are the two that, at least with the information we have now, that I prefer out of that top tier. Again, it's one of those like good problems to have type things. Like if you're just watching this and you're just like, man, like I want Schlittler, I want Burns. Cool. Like go for it. I'm not going to pretend that like the edge on the slate is not playing Chase Burns or not playing Cam Schlittler. You can absolutely make very good lineups with any of those guys. Pick who you want. They're all good. They all can go for 30 points. But I think, at least with what I'm looking at right now, my preferences will end up being probably Kyle Harrison and Joe Ryan out of that group. As far as the offenses go here, Brewers in a pretty good spot, or a decent spot at least, against McGreevy. As I mentioned, one of the weakest pitchers on the slate in terms of stuff and in terms of just overall talent. He does have good command. Those guys tend to be the ones that really piss you off if you stack against them and then watch the game, because you're watching and it's just like, I could have a decent at bat against this guy. Why can't my guys get hits against him? And it's just that he's putting the ball exactly where he wants to, and it ends up pissing you off. But this is one of those weird slates where like there haven't been a lot of terrible pitchers. There's been a lot of guys that aren't very good DFS pitchers, like 20% K guys that also get ground balls. So McGreevy, I think, is overall one of the weaker options on the slate. Since last year, a 267 expected ISO allowed to lefties, only 137 to righties. So far this year, 288 to lefties, 163 to righties. Certainly prefer left-handed bats against him from a splits standpoint. The Cardinals bullpen has 3 lefties in it, but one of them threw 59 pitches yesterday, so he's not pitching today. One of them's a back-end guy in JoJo Romero. So Justin Brule is really their only available non-late inning lefty. So that is a little bit of a slight benefit for left-handed bats on Milwaukee. You have Yelich leading off at 4,700. You have Turang batting third. You have Bowers hitting fifth. First base outfield eligible. Garrett Mitchell hitting sixth. So you have a very left-handed heavy lineup. The only righties in here are Jackson Chourio, William Contreras batting 2 and 4. Clearly, you can still play those guys, even though they're on the wrong side of those splits, because they are both really good. Jackson Chourio, gives you stolen base upside as well. But I do like the lineup that the Brewers are running out there. I like the fact that the Cardinals only have one lefty outside of JoJo Romero. If you get to JoJo Romero, again, you're probably just in a situation where either this is like a 10-9 game or the Cardinals are winning. And if the Cardinals are winning, obviously it's not super likely that the Brewers have a ton of runs. So I do like that one of the Cardinals' 2 earlier inning lefties is down today. That does make the Brewers look a little bit better, especially given those very, very favorable left-handed splits against Michael McGreevy. For the Cards, if you're going there, it's simply because Kyle Harrison's going to be rostered by a third of the field. And if he happens to suck, that's really good for you. But 118 expected ISO to righties with a 30% strikeout percentage since last season, 135 expected ISO to lefties, 24% strikeout percentage. The Cardinals are running a pretty balanced lineup out there. They have 5 righties, 4 lefties. But again, I've said it on a bunch of shows lately, and Harrison certainly backs it up. Like, my expectation when you're talking about a major league starting pitcher that is left-handed is that they are not going to have issues with right-handed bats. Sometimes they end up being reverse splits, and it just doesn't really matter because most teams don't have good lefties to use against them. In Harrison's case, he's not bad against lefties, but the strikeout percentage is higher against righties. He's allowed even less power to righties than lefties, even though he's also very good against lefties. So again, if you're going to the Cards, I don't think there's really any reason to argue for them other than if they happen to have a good game against a 33% owned pitcher, you're in pretty good shape because they're not going to get any ownership either. Again, I do prefer the Brewer side. And you are getting some ownership here, 11% to Turang. And I've mentioned several times that we think Turang is just a different hitter this year than he has been in the past, and that's reflected in his salary as well. But 11% ownership coming to Turang, 11% to Bowers, like 5 to 10% to most of the rest of this offense. So they'll probably be one of the more popular offenses, but also certainly expected to be a step behind Milwaukee as far as ownership, or behind the Yankees rather, as far as ownership goes. Colorado facing the Dodgers in LA. Eric Lauer making, I believe, his first start for the Dodgers after sort of weirdly talking his way out of Toronto because he didn't like following an opener. Kyle Freeland going for Colorado. It is a park upgrade for him. It is still one of the best places in baseball to hit home runs. So park upgrade because it's not Coors, but still not an easy park to pitch in. $5,800 price tag. If you wanted a direct one-to-one ownership pivot off of David Peterson, it's probably Kyle Freeland, just because he's essentially the same price and he's 1/20th, 1/15th of the ownership, somewhere in there. That being said, I would probably just play David Peterson and then play, like, you're going to get plenty of low-owned bats on a 10-game slate. Eric Lauer on the other side, getting some ownership here, 9%, 6,300, has the good matchup with the Rockies. He's not been a bad pitcher in his career. He's certainly not an ace or anything like that. Only 26 innings as a starter this season with a 15% strikeout percentage. Overall this year, only striking out 16% of hitters with a 6.9 FIP. He was horrible in 8 appearances for the Blue Jays this year. Last year, though, 28 total games, 15 starts, 104 innings pitched. He had a 3.85 FIP, 3.86 expected ERA. He struck out 23.9% of hitters. I certainly think it's more likely that he's closer to last year's guy than this year's guy, given that it was only 8 starts and just kind of had some weird stuff going on in Toronto. Also, the fact that the Dodgers, one of the certainly better, smarter organizations, was pretty quick to go out and grab Eric Lauer as well. Makes me think that they probably looked at him too, and they certainly didn't look and go like, oh yeah, this guy's broken, when they saw whatever they were looking at for Eric Lauer. So I think it's pretty likely that you see a bounce back for Eric Lauer with the Dodgers, certainly compared to what he was doing with the Blue Jays earlier this year. Makes him look like a pretty solid, cheap option here. Good matchup against the Rockies. They strike out a lot. They don't hit particularly well. There's not a whole lot to say other than this offense is very, very bad, and they're not in Coors Field. So again, good park for offense, good park for home runs, not Coors Field though. Offensively here, I do think that getting to the Rockies in tournaments does make some sense. I don't know if they're showing up in our sims. I know they were showing up earlier in the day when I looked at some stuff for me. They don't have a high team total. They shouldn't be popular. But I do think that Lauer ends up getting modest ownership, not a ton, but probably in that like 10-ish% range because he is so cheap. And then you do have, some decent bats here. Like Hunter Goodman is legitimately good. He's only 4,400 at catcher. Willie Castro, if he's in the lineup, has MPE at 2 positions that are pretty low opportunity cost. He's only 3,900. Tyler Freeland lost second base eligibility, which sucks. But he is still really cheap at 3,200. Tovar at 3,600 is cheap. So and then you do get a park that's good for home runs. So especially if like maybe you're somebody saying like, I want to get Schlittler and I want to get Burns, or I want to get Schlittler plus Harrison or something like that. I think the Rockies are kind of a sneaky team you can do it with because they are going to be so cheap, but they are in a park that's good for home runs. You can get those 2 good pitchers. You can probably mix in also like an Aaron Judge or an Alvarez or whatever. You can get some, good one-offs, mini stacks around them. So certainly not likely to succeed, but they are one of those teams where I think you can build lineups where you look at it and you're just like, well, if the Rockies succeed, everything else is in place. Like I have 2 of the best pitchers on the slate. I have 3 of the best other bats on the slate. I just need this offense to score runs in Dodger Stadium against a pitcher that, like I said, I think he'll be better going forward than he was year to date with Toronto, but that's not a guarantee. And there's certainly no guarantee it starts today. And he's been flat out terrible through his first 8 starts this year, or first 8 appearances rather, this season. So I do think the Rockies are kind of interesting here, especially given that I don't love any offenses on this slate so far. Like the Yankees are pretty clearly, I think, the best spot, but even that, like you do have a bullpen game, which is not super appealing, and they are really, really popular. No other offense has been like that interesting at all, other than Milwaukee. I do like against McGreevy. So that factors in too, where it's just like, yeah, the Rockies probably fail, but I haven't really seen many offenses yet that I like. So I do have some interest in Colorado. Dodgers on the other side. This one, I think, pretty straightforward. It's the Dodgers. They have one of the highest totals on the slate. Kyle Freeland is not horrible. He's also not good. 5.73 expected ERA, 19% strikeout percentage so far this season for Freeland. Does get out of Coors Field, which is good. Still is pitching in a hitter-friendly park in Dodger Stadium, and he's facing the Dodgers. So he's been worse this year than usual in most metrics. 5.7 FIP is about a run higher than his career. 5.73 expected ERA, about a run higher than his career. 7.04 actual ERA, about 2.5 runs higher than his career numbers. So through his first 8 starts, you have seen a worse version of Freeland so far this season. He does also have a long track record of being, like a 4.5 guy, but so far this year hasn't been particularly good. The Dodgers obviously are very, very good. I think they look like one of the best offenses on the slate. I don't think there's a whole lot to say there. 197 expected ISO to righties since last year for Freeland, 159 to lefties. So far this year, he's been more neutral, but very, very small sample, particularly against lefties. Only 120 pitches thrown there. So Shohei Ohtani, lefty, but he hits everyone well. Will Smith from the right side is going to look really good. Mookie at shortstop, only 4,500, getting 14% ownership, looks fine. Muncy, lefty, if he's in the lineup. Don't think we have a Dodgers lineup yet. At least we didn't last time I looked. But if he's in there, still can mix him in with your stacks. Same for Tucker. Teoscar is fine. So probably going to be like the second or third highest owned team on the slate. They'll probably be pretty similar to Milwaukee, be behind the Yankees. Would be my expectation, but they certainly look good. And then finally, you get Seattle and the A's in Sacramento. Emerson Hancock, 8,500, going for the Mariners. He has taken a step forward this year. Former top 10 pick. I don't remember what number he went, but early first round pick. I think he was like 3rd overall or something. And when he first kind of came up with Seattle, he didn't really have good strikeout stuff. And it was kind of just like, all right, why did they take a guy that has no ceiling? But he has, I believe, changed his arm slot this year, changed some stuff. 26% K percentage, 4.09 expected ERA in 58 2/3 innings for Hancock this year. He does get a pretty decent strikeout matchup with the A's. They're 13th in strikeout percentage on their active roster. 111 WRC plus is actually tied for 4th in baseball so far this season. But it is also a substantial park downgrade. You're going from the best pitcher's park in baseball in T-Mobile Park to the joke of a stadium in Sacramento. So not super interested in Hancock here. He doesn't project all that well. He is relatively expensive. So it's worth mentioning, that he is, I think, certainly a better pitcher this year than he has been in the past, but also not a slate where I think I really want to get to him, especially at full price. Gage Jump on the other side, making his major league debut. This is a top 100 pitching or top 100 prospect in baseball. He put up pretty good numbers so far at AAA. I read somewhere that he'd gotten off to a slow start, but his numbers through 9 starts, 38 innings pitched, struck out 33% of hitters, did walk 12%, 4.3 FIP. Oakland, or the A's AAA team, is in the PCL, so keep that in mind. He projects to be like a 20 to 22% K guy in most publicly available models. Oopsie, though, does have him at 24.5%. That is a model that I do like because it's a newer model that does incorporate a lot of the newer pitching data that you can incorporate. So I do think it's noteworthy that he does project a bit better in their model than a lot of the kind of models that have been around for a longer time. Not somebody that I think you really want to go out of your way to get to on this slate, given that he is pitching in Sacramento. He is facing a Seattle team that has a lot of power. He is not super cheap at 7K. Not that he's expensive, but you have, Peterson is $1,300 less expensive than him. Lauer is less expensive than him against the Rockies. Burke is less expensive than him. So it's not like he's like the cheapest viable option on the slate or anything, but he is getting very little ownership if you happen to need a low-owned SP2. Like maybe you went one of the pay-up SP1s, and then you went the really popular Yankees, and you have popular one-offs, and so you don't want to play 20% on David Peterson. Then yeah, you can mix this guy in. He certainly has upside, but major league debut, obviously very, very wide range of outcomes there, and not an ideal matchup. So now I will go through, take a look at the results of the sim that I had run before the show, see what I was getting to there. This is obviously a look at the Sims tool that we're working on. It'll, like I'd said at the top, it'll be out sooner rather than later. But the highest owned pitchers that I'm getting to using Shady Advice's portfolio manager, 49% Kyle Harrison, 36% on Nola, 24 on Ryan. So that puts me above the field on all three of those guys. A little over the field on Jack Leiter here. David Peterson at 15%, so a little behind the field, but pretty close. Same for Sean Burke. I am under the field on Chase Burns, not even on Mahle, even on Rodriguez. So I am under on Schlittler as well, getting to small amounts here of Lauer and Gage Jump. So nothing really surprising. I think that, again, if you want a little bit less Harrison and you want a bit more Schlittler or Burns, obviously that is fine. Same goes, for Joe Ryan. If you wanted to dial back a little bit of the Aaron Nola, because he is Aaron Nola, 2026 Aaron Nola, not a stud anymore, by all means, you can dial that back a little bit, increase whatever you want of your Mahle, Rodriguez, Lauer, like Alcantara tier. But I'm pretty happy with how these exposures look. I don't see anything that I wouldn't want to play. Again, not that there's a guarantee all of it works, but I don't look at any of this and go like, oh shit, why do I have that? Taking a look at catcher, Will Smith at the top, followed by Langoliers, Austin Wells, William Contreras, Mitch Garver. No problems with any of those. First base, Shohei. So I am about half the field on Ohtani. Not really surprising to me. That's kind of been what's happened for me a lot this year on the most expensive, highest owned hitters. Still getting him as one of my highest owned bats, just not as much as the field, which is fine on a 10-game slate. I like that I'm getting Jake Bauers. I like quite a bit that I'm getting Jake Bauers. Clemens, good point per dollar play. I like that I'm getting Stewart. I mentioned Cincinnati as a negative correlation play to David Peterson. I actually had not noticed that I was getting Stewart when I quickly looked, so that wasn't even me trying to set this up. I'm actually really happy with the fact that I got there. Ben Rice, Nick Kurtz, obviously no problems with any of that. At second base, Turang at the top. Love that. Jazz, cool, whatever. Tatis, Stott. Nothing super interesting at second base, mostly just like a fucking terrible position. Third base, Garcia. Don't love that one, but I get it. Like if I'm not playing a lot of Schlittler, it makes sense to get to some Kansas City, and Garcia, Witt, and one of the catchers are going to be the most likely guys to get to. Sal Stewart again, Vargas. Interesting because I have a lot of Ryan, so nice to have Vargas in some non-Ryan lineups. Nothing that really stands out too much here at third base. Shortstop, getting to Bobby Witt. So again, in my brain, I don't really like Kansas City too much, but it does make some sense if I'm not going to have a lot of Schlittler from a portfolio standpoint to also be getting to Kansas City guys. And again, certainly playing Bobby Witt, Michael Garcia, and they're also cheap. You're getting some salary discount in the matchup as well. Caballero, Mookie, talked about Adames against Rodriguez being too cheap, so I think that looks cool. De La Cruz against Peterson, that looks pretty good. Pretty close to the field on Mookie. And then in the outfield, Aaron Judge in line with the field there, that's fine. Bellinger in line with the field, over the field on Julio Rodriguez against Jump making his major league debut. That's cool. Jackson Chourio. So I am getting to the Brewers. I do like that quite a bit. Really happy with how this looks, honestly. That's my Yordan Alvarez, 2x the field. So I had mentioned that, not something I had looked at. A little over the field, pretty similar on Buxton. So yeah, honestly, I think it looks pretty good. Highest owned stacks for me, 5-mans, Yankees, Houston, Milwaukee, Seattle, A's. But you can see everything's really flat here other than essentially the Yankees at the top. But I did like the Yankees, obviously. I like the Astros decent amount. You get that negative correlation against Leiter. I like that I'm getting to Milwaukee. Also notice here, getting to Milwaukee a lot in 2-mans. So that's interesting. It's probably a lot of Turang Bowers, Turang Chourio, whatever. I think that's appealing. Getting to the Dodgers mostly as 2-mans as opposed to 5-mans. Getting to 5-man Yankees more than 2-mans. So that's interesting there. So pretty fun slate. A lot of different ways that you can go. I can think. Lone said, didn't realize ShipMyShipper still did DFS shows. Yeah, not as consistently as I probably should, but try and do at least a couple a week. Going to try and be more consistent with it going forward as well, especially since we are releasing the Sims tool soon. Also, for those unfamiliar, this is directly from Brick75, Nerdy Tanner, Yuta, myself. So really excited about that. Really excited to be releasing something that, we were able to directly build. We know exactly what it does, and it does exactly what we wanted it to. So yeah, links for everything in the description below. Don't forget, thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, all that stuff helps out quite a bit. Good luck on your lineups tonight. Might be back tomorrow. I have something to do in the morning, and it's a Wednesday, so you have the 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock. But I probably will at the very least do something for the afternoon slate, or the night slate, I would think. I'm not sure if I'll have time for the morning, but either way, notifications so you know when I post something. Thanks again for checking out the show. Good luck tonight, and I'll see you all back here later.